Hello and welcome to Listen and Learn English. I'm Catherine, and I'm so happy you've joined me today. You know what happened to me this morning? I was enjoying my coffee on my balcony when a tiny hummingbird flew right up to me. It hovered there for a few seconds, its wings beating so fast they were just a blur, and we had this magical moment of eye contact before it darted away to the flowers. These little, unexpected moments of wonder are what make life special, don't they? Speaking of special moments, I want to tell you about my trip to Kyoto, Japan last spring. It was something I'd been dreaming about for years, and the experience completely exceeded my expectations. If you're listening to improve your English, feel free to pause this recording and repeat any phrases that catch your ear. In fact, that's how I improved my own Japanese before the trip, by repeating after native speakers. My journey to Japan started with a rather embarrassing mix-up at the airport. I had accidentally gone to the wrong terminal and nearly missed my flight. I was rushing through the airport, luggage bouncing behind me, heart racing. When I finally found the right gate, they were making the final boarding call. "You just made it," the gate agent said with a smile as she scanned my boarding pass. I collapsed into my seat on the plane, completely out of breath, but relieved. Sometimes the most memorable parts of travel are these little mishaps along the way. If you're practicing your English listening, try rewinding and listening to that little story again. Notice how my voice changes when I'm describing the rushing feeling. That's how we express urgency in English. The flight to Japan was long, almost 14 hours from Chicago. I tried to sleep, but I was too excited. Instead, I watched Japanese movies with English subtitles to prepare myself for the language I'd be hearing. That's a technique I always recommend to my language students. Immerse yourself in the language through films and music before your trip. If you're learning English, why not try watching your favorite movie in English with subtitles in your language? When I finally arrived in Tokyo, I was exhausted but thrilled. The city was a sensory overload. Bright neon signs, crowds of people, the smell of street food, and announcements in Japanese echoing through the train stations. I spent 2 days there before taking the bullet train to Kyoto. Ah, Kyoto. What a contrast to Tokyo's modern energy. Kyoto is filled with ancient temples, traditional gardens, and a sense of calm that feels almost magical. My first morning there, I woke up early to visit Fushimi Inari Shrine before the crowds arrived. Have you ever seen photos of those bright orange torii gates that form tunnels up the mountainside? That's Fushimi Inari. I started climbing the path at sunrise, and for about 30 minutes I was completely alone among thousands of these vibrant gates. The morning light filtered through them, creating patterns on the stone path. If you're practicing shadowing, that's when you repeat what you hear immediately after listening. Try shadowing this description. The rhythm of English often flows in waves, with stressed and unstressed syllables creating a kind of music. Feel free to pause and repeat after me. As I climbed higher up the mountain, I could hear birds singing and the distant sound of a stream. It was so peaceful that I sat down on a stone step just to take it all in. That's when I met Hiroshi, an elderly Japanese man who was making his weekly pilgrimage up the mountain. "Good morning," he said in English, surprising me. "Beautiful day, yes?" His simple greeting began one of the most meaningful conversations of my trip. Hiroshi had been an English teacher before retiring, and he told me he climbed this mountain every week to stay healthy and honor his ancestors. "Many tourists rush," he said, gesturing to the path ahead. "They take photo, then go. But mountain has many secrets if you go slow." I decided to take Hiroshi's advice and slow down. We walked together for the next 2 hours, and he showed me small shrines and hidden viewpoints that weren't in any guidebook. He spoke slowly and clearly, knowing English wasn't my first language. Wait, that's not right. English is my first language, but he spoke in a way that would help anyone learning English. If you're listening to improve your English, Hiroshi's advice applies to language learning too. Don't rush. Take time to notice the details. When you're listening to English, sometimes try slowing down the audio or replaying sections to catch every word. That's how you discover the secrets of natural pronunciation. By midday, Hiroshi and I had reached a small tea house near the top of the mountain. We sat on a wooden platform overlooking the city of Kyoto spread out below us, sipping green tea that tasted grassy and fresh. "Why did you come to Japan?" Hiroshi asked me. It was a simple question, but it made me think. Why had I been so drawn to this particular country? I told him about my grandfather, who had been stationed in Japan after World War II. Despite the complicated history between our countries, my grandfather had fallen in love with Japanese culture and brought that appreciation home with him. He used to show me his collection of Japanese woodblock prints when I was a little girl, I explained. He taught me to use chopsticks and made green tea that I thought was terrible back then. I laughed at the memory. Hiroshi smiled. "And now you like green tea?" I held up my cup. "Now I love it." That's how tastes change as we grow, isn't it? The same happens with language learning. Words or sounds that feel awkward or difficult at first gradually become familiar and even beautiful with practice. If you're finding certain English sounds challenging, keep practicing them. Your ear and tongue will adapt over time. After saying goodbye to Hiroshi, I continued exploring Kyoto on my own. The next day, I visited a traditional Japanese garden called Ryoanji, famous for its Zen rock garden. It's just 15 rocks arranged on a bed of carefully raked gravel, but it's designed so that you can never see all 15 rocks at once from any viewing angle. As I sat on the wooden platform contemplating the garden, a tour guide was explaining its significance to a group nearby. "This garden teaches us about perspective," she said. "What we see depends on where we stand. Some things remain hidden until we change our position." Her words were so profound that I wrote them down in my journal. Profound. Say it with me. Profound. When something is profound, it shows deep meaning or insight. If you're practicing pronunciation, try that word again. Profound. Notice how the emphasis is on the second syllable. That idea about perspective stayed with me throughout my trip. It's true for travel, isn't it? But it's equally true for language learning. Sometimes we need to approach things from a different angle to truly understand them. The following day, I had arranged to take a cooking class to learn how to make traditional Japanese dishes. The class was held in an old wooden house with paper sliding doors and tatami mat floors. Our teacher, Mariko, was a woman in her 60s who spoke English with a thick Japanese accent but expressed herself beautifully. "Cooking is not just following recipe," she told us as we tied on our aprons. "Cooking is feeling with your hands, tasting with your heart." I loved that expression, tasting with your heart. If you're practicing English, try repeating that phrase with the same rhythm, tasting with your heart. In English, we often stress the most important words in a sentence, which gives our language its characteristic rhythm. Under Mariko's patient guidance, we learned to make perfect sushi rice, sticky but with each grain distinct, and to roll maki sushi with nori seaweed. My rolls looked nothing like Mariko's perfect cylinders, but she assured me that taste was more important than appearance. "In Japan, we value wabi-sabi," she explained. Beauty in imperfection. What a liberating concept! As someone who tends toward perfectionism, I found this idea so freeing. And it applies perfectly to language learning too. Your English doesn't need to be perfect to be beautiful and effective. Those small imperfections in your accent or grammar are part of your unique voice. If you're listening to improve your English, remember wabi sabi. Embrace the beauty of your English as it is now, even as you work to improve it. Try repeating this. My English has its own beauty, because it truly does. After the cooking class, I decided to explore Kyoto by bicycle. The city is fairly flat and has good cycling paths, making it an ideal way to see multiple temples and shrines in one day. I rented a bike from a small shop near my hotel, where the owner gave me a detailed map and marked his favorite spots. "This temple very famous," he said, circling one location. "But this one," he pointed to a smaller shrine off the main tourist path, "more beautiful, I think." Very quiet. Taking his advice, I pedaled across the city, following the Kamo River before turning into a residential neighborhood. The streets became narrower, lined with traditional wooden houses and small gardens. I almost missed the entrance to the shrine, just a simple stone gate partially hidden by a maple tree. Inside, I found myself completely alone in a garden that seemed from another world. Stone lanterns lined a moss-covered path that led to a small wooden shrine building. The afternoon sun filtered through Japanese maple trees, creating dappled shadows on the ground. I sat on a bench, listening to the gentle sound of a bamboo water fountain. Tranquility washed over me. Tranquility, repeat after me. Tranquillity. It means a peaceful, calm state without noise or disturbance. If you're practicing your English pronunciation, try saying that beautiful word again, tranquility. In that quiet moment, I reflected on how different this experience was from my usual busy life back home in Chicago, where I'm always rushing from one appointment to the next, constantly checking my phone, rarely sitting still long enough to just breathe and observe. Travel has this wonderful way of breaking our normal patterns and showing us different ways to live. I made a promise to myself that I would try to bring some of this tranquility home with me to create small pockets of calm in my daily routine. As the sun began to set, I reluctantly got back on my bicycle to return to the hotel. The ride back took me through a market street where food vendors were setting up their stalls for the evening. The smell of grilling yakitori, chicken skewers, was tantalizing. Tantalizing, say it with me, tantalizing. When something is tantalizing, it's extremely appealing and makes you want it badly. Try that word once more. Tantalizing. I couldn't resist stopping for dinner. I found a small stall with just 5 seats at a counter where an older couple was grilling skewers over charcoal. Despite the language barrier, they spoke almost no English, and my Japanese was limited to basic phrases. We managed to communicate through smiles, gestures, and my rudimentary food vocabulary. The man handed me a skewer of chicken thigh meat brushed with a sweet soy glaze. It was still sizzling from the grill, and the first bite was absolutely perfect, juicy, savory, with a hint of smokiness from the charcoal. I closed my eyes to fully appreciate the flavors. "Good?" the woman asked, one of the few English words she knew. "Oishi," I replied, using the Japanese word for delicious, which made them both smile broadly. They continued serving me different skewers: chicken with green onion, mushrooms wrapped in bacon, grilled eggplant with miso paste, each one more delicious than the last. As I ate, other customers came and went, mostly locals stopping for a quick dinner on their way home from work. An elderly man took the seat next to me and nodded hello. After ordering his food, he turned to me and asked in careful English, "You are from where?" "America," I replied. "Chicago." "Ah, Chicago." His face lit up. "Michael Jordan." He mimicked shooting a basketball. I laughed and nodded. No matter where you go in the world, some things are universal. Basketball stars, the language of food, and the human desire to connect across differences. If you're practicing your English listening, try rewinding and listening to this market scene again. Notice the different sentence lengths and how they create rhythm in storytelling. Short sentences often add emphasis or create a sense of simplicity. Longer, more complex sentences can help paint a detailed picture or express more nuanced thoughts. My last day in Kyoto was perhaps the most magical. I had arranged to stay at a traditional ryokan, a Japanese inn with tatami mat rooms, futon beds, and a communal hot spring bath. The ryokan was located in Arashiyama, an area known for its bamboo forest and monkey park. When I arrived, I was asked to remove my shoes in the entrance hall and was given slippers to wear inside. A hostess in a kimono led me to my room, sliding open the paper door and bowing as she showed me in. The room was minimalist perfection. A low table in the center, a scroll painting in the alcove, and windows overlooking a small private garden. "Bath time is from 3 o'clock, she explained, showing me the cotton yukata robe I would wear. "Dinner at 6 o'clock in your room." After settling in, I decided to explore the bamboo forest before my bath. The path through the bamboo was like walking through a living green cathedral. The tall stalks swayed gently in the breeze, creating a sound like no other, a sort of whispering rustle that was both eerie and soothing. The light filtered through the dense bamboo in a way that made everything seem slightly ethereal. Ethereal, repeat after me, E-theer-E-al. When something is ethereal, it seems too perfect or delicate for this world, almost supernatural. If you're practicing English, try that beautiful word once more, ethereal. I wandered the path for an hour, taking photos that could never capture the true feeling of being surrounded by those towering green stalks. Eventually, I made my way back to the ryokan for my first experience with a Japanese onsen bath. I was a bit nervous about the communal bathing aspect, but I reminded myself that this was an important cultural experience. The bathing area was divided by gender, and I found myself alone in the women's section, a stroke of luck for my first time. Following the instructions I'd been given, I washed thoroughly at the shower stations before entering the hot spring bath itself. The outdoor bath was surrounded by rocks and plants, creating the illusion of bathing in a natural mountain pool. The water was much hotter than I expected. I had to ease in inch by inch, letting my body adjust to the temperature. Once fully immersed, I felt my muscles relaxing in a way they never had before. The combination of the hot mineral water, the cool evening air on my face, and the view of stars appearing in the darkening sky created a moment of perfect contentment. If you're using this podcast to improve your English, try shadowing this description of the bath experience. Shadowing means speaking along with me, matching my pace and intonation. It's one of the best ways to develop natural rhythm in your English speaking. After my bath, I returned to my room to find that dinner had been arranged on the low table. A multi-course kaiseki meal served in beautiful ceramic dishes. There was grilled fish, tempura vegetables, pickled plums, miso soup, and at least 6 other small dishes I couldn't identify but thoroughly enjoyed. The hostess who served me noticed my interest in the food and began explaining each dish in limited but enthusiastic English. When she brought the dessert, a perfect sliced persimmon with a sweet bean paste, she sat down briefly to ask about my trip. "What is most surprising for you in Japan? She asked carefully, choosing her words. I thought about it for a moment. The balance, I replied. Modern and traditional, busy and peaceful, everything exists together so harmoniously. She nodded, seeming pleased with my answer. Yes, balance is very important. In food, in life. That night, sleeping on the futon with its firm but comfortable cotton mattress, I reflected on my journey. Travel changes us in subtle but significant ways. We return home with new perspectives, new tastes, new words in our vocabulary. The next morning, as I reluctantly packed my bags to head back to Tokyo for my flight home, I found a small package outside my door, a parting gift from the ryokan. Inside was a hand-folded origami crane with a note that read, "Origami crane means long life and happiness. Please come back to Kyoto again." I carefully packed the delicate paper crane in my journal to keep it safe. 6 months later, it sits on my desk in Chicago, a daily reminder of that magical week in Kyoto and the connections I made across language and cultural differences. If you've been listening to improve your English, I encourage you to try telling your own travel story, even a short one, using some of the descriptive words we've used today. Words like profound, tranquility, tantalizing, and ethereal add richness to your storytelling. Remember, one of the best ways to improve your English listening is to listen to the same story multiple times. Each time you listen, you'll catch more details and understand more fully. Try listening to this episode again, perhaps focusing on a different aspect each time. First for the overall story, then for new vocabulary, then for pronunciation patterns. And don't forget to practice speaking too. Pause the recording and repeat phrases you like, trying to match the intonation and rhythm. This technique, called shadowing, helps train your ear and your speaking muscles at the same time. Thank you so much for joining me for this journey to Kyoto. I hope my story has transported you there for a little. Next week, I'll tell you about my disastrous but hilarious attempt at learning to surf in Hawaii. Until then, keep listening, keep practicing, and remember that every time you engage with English, you're building your skills even when it feels challenging. This is Catherine from Listen and Learn English, wishing you happy listening and wonderful adventures, both in language learning and in life. Goodbye for now.